Welcome to the third episode of The Plastic Cup. For those of you, I don't know if you've checked in on some of the other episodes that we've had, but these are just conversations with women in our church. We go to Community Baptist Church in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and the Plastic Cup is really just intended to start conversations, to make connections, and have a little fun during this kind of weird time we find ourselves in right now. So that's just the purpose of it. I have with me today Jess Tindol, who is my good friend. Do you mind just kind of giving a summary of who you are? Not a lot of people maybe know. I mean, they know you're here. They hear your name. If their kids are in youth group, they know you pretty well. But we kind of just threw you right in there right away, and you jumped right in, which was great. But I think sometimes people haven't had a chance to get to know you. So
sure,
kind of share.
I'm Jessica. She said that is my name. That's true. I am married to Kyle Tindol. We've been married for about 5 years, actually, this year. We've lived in Tennessee for just over a year, almost a year and a half. I work as a dementia specialist in a memory care unit, and my husband works as he works in the apartment and the renting field for American Homes for Rent, so he's called a field supervisor. And our jobs are just kind of what we do, but we moved to Tennessee in order to work with the youth group at Community Baptist.
And you have big news coming up?
Yes, we are expecting a child. And we're having a little girl in July. So
very exciting. What's it like, kind of the pregnancy during this whole COVID thing? It's
different.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Which I'm okay with. I'm very much like I don't mind being at home. I don't mind being alone. So for me, it hasn't been super terrible. Mm-hmm. I have a really valid excuse to stay home. So that's been fine. I think it's more taxing on Kyle than anyone else.
Yes, Kyle is a people person.
Yes.
For sure. Jess and I actually, probably over 10 years ago, we really met. Jess and I's story started. My husband and I moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, and she was a senior, I think around the time, right?
Yeah, I think
senior
so.
in high school when we came to the church up there. Her dad pastored a church near the school, but they attended the school. So we got to know Jess just through being with the seniors and things like that, working with the youth group. So I think you went to a couple winter retreats or something with Pastor Dan, right? Mm-hmm. So, but you were kind of phasing out of that part of your life a little bit, kind of heading to college the year after. So I knew you by name. I knew your family because your dad helped at the school, and of course your younger siblings and stuff. But I didn't really know you that well at that time. But our lives, I felt like, kept kind of intersecting, over this time. So going back to the whole, you were a senior, I thought I'd share a little story. We didn't know her super well, but we maimed her for life. So we had, what my husband and I would do every year is we would have senior night at our house. And what we do is we get really nice steaks and potatoes and make a special meal for the seniors, and kind of that was their parting thing.
On the grill.
On the grill, which that was our first one I think we did. So, we had recently gotten a house that we could have a grill. We didn't have, so grilling was new for us. And I think that night Dan almost burned the house down. I looked out the window and flames were very, very high, and it should not have been. But it all worked out. No one died. That was good. I think that might have been the night that Carter, he was 2.
He was very young.
He was very little.
That.
It was either that one or that graduation party we had for Gary and Peter. But one of those 2 nights, he ended up streaking in front of everybody. And I looked out my window and I was like, oh, my child's naked.
And I wouldn't know because I was only there for part of that.
This is true. So the spatula story, we call it. We had senior night. All the seniors were there. They're out in our backyard hanging out. And we have this really sharp, I think we probably got it for a wedding gift. It was one of those all-in-one spatulas. So it has serrated sides and pokies. I don't even know what they all do. But all these special sides that you can do all these things with. Well, we had a good friend, Peter Cho, our dear friend.
Oh, you're going to name him.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Calling him
and
out.
And so he was out there, and he was just having fun, like pretending or whatever. But
I like that you do this because he's actually he was a bodybuilder.
Yes,
he's not a small dude.
Yes.
At any point.
Yes.
So he was
yeah. He's a bigger guy, and he was flicking it for fun. I don't know. I forget exactly. Was he just messing with you or something like that?
I wasn't really paying attention to that at that moment. I wish I would have because
the head, literally that sharp, serrated, all those pointing edge, literally flew out like a Chinese star. And like sliced right, your shin?
My shin, yeah. It got
right down the center of the shin. I mean, like bad, like flesh.
like 7 stitches.
And so we were like, ah! So anyway, you had to go get stitches. Your dad it was not a very convenient time for your dad because he was leaving the country.
I love that you remember that part of the story because
we felt really bad.
When you talked to me about doing this, I thought, and you mentioned this story, I was like, I remember my dad being frustrated that he had to take me to the hospital.
Horrible.
Like he was just like, I can't believe this, and I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say.
Her dad was going to a missions trip or something, wasn't he?
I don't know.
Something.
I don't really remember.
The next day, so he had to go take her to it was, we had a good time, but it was, definitely one of those maybe newbie pastors, like youth pastor
I can't believe
stories.
you ever did that again after.
We did. We avoided the spatula.
Okay.
That spatula I don't think came out to the other parties. So that was one of our interactions with Jess. She still wanted to come to Tennessee. So I would say somehow it's a win.
No, what's funny is that you mentioned that story, and it was when we moved here, I didn't realize that had happened at your house. Literally,
What?
you brought it up one night. We were in your kitchen, and I was like, oh, that happened at your house. And you're like, yeah, that happened at my house. And I was like, I had not connected that. You guys did our wedding. I mean, we'd known you for a while. We'd moved to Tennessee, and I did not connect that story.
Well, that's good.
One of our first memories
associate
together.
us with such negative things. So then, fast forward a few years after the spatula story, Kyle, her husband, they were dating at the time, but he actually interned under Dan at Emmanuel, the church we were at before in Pennsylvania. So I actually got to know Kyle, I feel like, better before I got to know you because he was around that summer and hanging out with Dan a lot and stuff like that. So we kind of knew him a little better after that summer. And then you're right, Dan married you. And I was there. I got to play my violin for you. That was fun. You picked some really fun music too.
Oh, thank you.
It was not traditional. The traditional music. There's some fun stuff. So it was good.
It wasn't that untraditional.
No, but it was fun. It was
different
very,
music.
I would say it's very personalized.
Yes.
I think that's cool. So we did that, and then I remember. Well, why don't you explain that night that you happened chance to come to the church there that one night?
Okay, so
our first conversation.
So we lived in New York City for about 14 months, and it was maybe like 6 or 7 months before we moved to Tennessee. My parents were supposed to come and visit us in New York City and stay and visit, and then some things fell through, so they weren't able to. And I remember being devastated because I missed my parents. I was so excited to show them the city, and it just wasn't going to work out. So Kyle very sweetly planned a weekend getaway, and he planned it for us to go to Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. I still have a lot of my childhood friends. My best friend lived there, and actually his best friend had moved there too. So we went and we stayed that weekend, and actually it happened to be your last weekend there. And so his best friend called him and just said, hey, it's Dan and Brenda's last weekend. They're having a reception, and you guys should really drop by. And you're right. I think for that whole time I knew you guys, but you knew Kyle a lot better than you knew me. And I was just like, okay, sure. So we dropped by, and it was such an interesting night because we walked in. We knew a lot of the people there, but then it was almost like it was so quiet around us as we began to like talk and really kind of catch up. And it was just such a random thing because we'd just kind of been ships passing the whole time. Like I was leaving and you guys were coming in, and then just kind of strange little, instances like that. And then that night it was just kind of like something clicked. And you guys were like, well, what are you guys planning to do after this? And we kind of were like, well, we don't know yet. We're kind of open to anything that God may have for us. And Dan was like, well, I may call you. And I don't think either of us really took that very serious. We're like, whatever.
I think we were we talked about it. Anyone from our church in Pennsylvania will know that very many conversations I said, you can come down with us. I was trying to recruit everybody to come with us. Sorry, Pastor Cruz. But all my friends, I wanted to take them with me. So I think it was one of those things too. It was like, you guys should come. Yeah, we'll call you. But it was one of those not that we wouldn't, but it was so not on our radar. Mm-hmm. But it was like, yes, sure, if you want to come, let's come. So that was our very first conversation of come to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Not super serious because, we hadn't been down here yet. We didn't really know exactly what the needs were or all that. So, but then when we moved down here, the need was there for someone to work with the youth, and like a permanent set of people, there were great people that had been helping and different things like that. But I felt like to move forward in that area, we needed a committed couple who, for us, our biggest thing was, Kyle's a great teacher and stuff like that. But for us, we're looking for the heart, because you cannot manufacture the heart. That's got to be there. Teaching, all the extra things, that can come. If you have the heart, that's what we need. And honestly, that's one thing that one conversation we had on our reception at Manual, is we thought, after talking with you guys and hearing your heart, hearing what brought you to New York City, hearing like your circumstances, just your experiences there, we were like, the heart is there. So as soon as like Dan and Pastor Mike had talked about, what the needs are of the church, like he came home and he was telling me some of the conversations, and we both were like, you need to call Kyle. You need to actually have a serious conversation, because they talked about being willing. It's just, they didn't know what the next step was. So that was the beginning of the conversations of, would you consider praying, and would you consider coming to visit? So explain that visit and think,
our first conversation,
Mm-hmm.
your reception I think was in May.
Okay, yeah.
And we flew down in November, because it was my birthday. We flew in on my birthday. So it was a relatively short amount of time, and I remember Kyle saying to me, Dan called me, and I thought, really? He called you? Why? And he was like, oh, well, they need someone to do youth group at the church in Tennessee. And I said, okay. And then he's like, well, they want to fly us down there. And I thought, okay, well, a lot's going to have to happen for us to actually move to Tennessee. Not that we're totally open, but I mean, for us to find jobs, to find housing, and we come with a couple large things. We have 2 very big dogs, and housing is not always the easiest thing. And so we flew down, and there was one apartment complex in all of Spring Hill that allowed dogs bigger than 50 pounds, which both of ours are. And we had set up a couple job interviews too, and we went to this apartment complex. We're like, we'll just check it out. We walked in, and Kyle looked at the property manager, and he said, hey, do you need a maintenance guy? And she said, yeah, how did you know that? And he was like, I just thought I'd ask. And she's like, oh, are you really seriously interested? And he said, yeah. And I had actually already done my interview at my job that I'm still at and really enjoy, and had already been offered the job. And so he had come in and filled out the application, interviewed with the maintenance director on the spot, and then was offered the job. And we told them, like, we need a place to live. And they were like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And they toured us and everything. So we then got in the car, and we're like, okay, that was interesting. And we drove back to your house. And I think we walked in, and we're like, so I think we found a place to live, and we both have jobs now.
I distinctly remember your faces, your facial expressions when you walked in the door. And I was like, how did it go? I'm like, wanting to hear. And like, you guys both had this like blank stare, and you were like, it was really weird. Like, basically, we have a job and we have a house.
I mean, it was waiting for us kind of thing. Like, we walked in, Kyle, I don't know what prompted Kyle to just ask that question, but he was like, oh, do you need that? And she looked at him almost like,
why would you ask that?
I do. And I think it was fairly recent. Like, they didn't really have the job posted yet or anything. So yeah, it was very unique circumstances, and it was unique for us to be on a flight back to New York Dan and I, that clear, and he really did. So
yeah, Dan and I that whole weekend, we just felt like God was being very clear and just directing and gracious, and how he kind of opened those things up. And I do want you to share that whole, when you went back to New York, there was the whole, you had to close everything out there with the apartments and things like that. And there was, I remember Kyle or you, one of you calling and just basically being like, okay, there's a big hang up here. And you go ahead and share that, and then share how God worked that out.
So our lease, we still were in a lease. That was really the only thing was, and rent's not cheap in New York. I think everybody knows that. But our apartment, we would have been still in a lease until probably March 1st. So December, January, February, and March. So it would have been about a few $1,000s. And we said, we're still on the hook for this. Like, we still have to, either we need to pay it up or we're going to have to pay it when we move. And that was a big concern. And we don't have just, piles of money laying around, unfortunately. But, and we, we were very honest. We tried to be very honest with you guys, like, hey, we would like to come really soon, but we're not really sure if this is going to work out. And Kyle called our landlord and they said, oh, no, don't worry about paying that. They said, you're on the hook until we re-rent the apartment. And I mean, it was re-rented in less than a month. Like, it was incredible because we were then not on the hook for any of the money. And we turned around, I think we moved here 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
fast.
we November 9th we left, and by December 2nd we were here. So
and even really
the
year and a half you've been here, I mean, you've done a lot of things. I mean, Kyle actually, he has a different job now, and you guys bought a house. I mean, you've done some like big things in a short amount of time, and just it's been neat to see God move and work and things. So we're going to kind of change gears here, and we're going to get into, I want to explain my Dave & Buster's cup here because it's very large.
Not sponsored by Dave & Buster's.
Not sponsored by Dave & Buster's, that's right.
Unfortunately.
But, our series is called The Plastic Cup, so I thought I'd try to bring cups that would, share a little story. So this cup, a couple years ago, we go to vacation in Florida every year, and it was kind of rainy out for a few days, and, with 4 kids in a condo, rain is not that great as far as keeping them occupied and stuff. So we were like, Dan's like, let's just take them somewhere. We'll go somewhere. So we ended up at Dave & Buster's. And the kids played these games, and we got them little cards because it's vacation. And at the end when they give you all those little tickets, and then you have to feed it in the machine, and they get to like pick something out of their store. I hate those stores with 4 small children. Those are the worst stores. It should be torture for parents. But they wanted to spend their thing, so we're like, great. Well, Carter, he kind of looked around a little bit, but there really wasn't anything that he could afford that he was interested in, and he kind of looked for a while, but he was secretly eyeing this up, and I didn't know at the time he was looking to buy this for me. Aww. So he didn't quite have enough, so he talked with his sisters quietly and was like, when you're all done, if you have a little bit extra, give it to me, and I'm gonna, So he bought this for me of his own ticket stubs or whatever you call them. And so it's special to me because those of you who know my dear son, he's a very sweet boy, but he's kind of oblivious at times and things like that. So it just means a lot. He would think of me and do that. So this is why I brought this cup, because it has that meaning to it. So Jess, what is your favorite go-to cup? And this doesn't, I know you brought one. I don't know if it's your ultimate favorite or not, and why? So
if anybody has been to our home, they know that we have a mug rack in our home, and we have a collection of mugs. I brought one of my favorites. I have lots of mugs. This one particularly was made by a girl I went to college with, and I ordered it from her, and it's grumpy, which if you know me, I'm not always the most cheerful person, I would say. So this is definitely the epitome, I think, of my personality. And I love this mug so much. And that is, I don't know that I have really a story. I just
Are you
loved
going to
it.
share the name? I think
his name is Hiram. So the maker of this, Olivia, which I don't know if she'll ever get to see this or not, but she's very talented. She named every single one of these grumpy mugs. And I thought that was so cute. His name is Hiram, though. So.
All right, so good. So we have Hiram and Dave & Buster's here. Do you have a favorite drink?
Oh, it's coffee. And even now
How do you
that
take your coffee?
Pregnant, I'm still coffee. With cream and just creamer, typically. I'm playing around with it now that I'm pregnant. I did have a couple weeks where I couldn't drink coffee in the first trimester. It just was a no-go, but I'm back on it. It's safe again. I can drink it. Very happy.
Very good. So one of the questions I want to ask you, because you've lived in several places for chunks of time, almost in a way, if you look back, kind of like sectioning your life in kind of little growth spurts, I guess, growth spots. So what are some of your biggest takeaways from some of the different places you've been at? You've been in PA, you've been in South Carolina, you've been in New York City,
sure.
And then here. What are some of your biggest takeaways?
So I think of South Carolina as we think of that as home now, I think. My family lives there, and Kyle's family, a lot of Kyle's extended family lives there. And his mom and stepdad actually live like about 2 hours south of there. So whenever we are going to South Carolina, it's because we're going to see everyone. So we have always associated that with home now, where it's where we met, where we fell in love, where we got married, or where we were first married. We didn't get married there, but we did have our first apartment there. We adopted both of our dogs. So South Carolina is definitely what I think of as home. It's the place that really equipped us to go out and be open to leaving and going anywhere else. So that our takeaway from there is just always be open to whatever God's going to do, because if you are, then He will do big things with you. He will change your life for sure. We did live in New York City for 14 months, like I said. New York City was just I refer to that as our boot camp kind of a deal. We have such rich and strong memories in New York, and we miss a lot of New York. Kyle will spend hours on the phone with a couple of friends from New York, a couple of his coworkers. So we have a lot of relationships that have lasted out of that. And one of the things that really affected us was just our church there that we attended. We loved those people so very much, and the cost of Christianity in New York City is a lot different than anywhere else in the country we've ever lived. And I was thinking about this morning how the people that we went to church with, pretty much everybody had to sacrifice something to attend church. They had to make long travel into church to just meet with each other, or to go visit somebody else in your church. You would spend an hour and a half on the train or on the ferry. And I think that was the first time either of us had really experienced that, where this was something you were committed to, and it wasn't just something easy part of everyone's life. If you went to church, you kind of had to explain why. And that was life-changing for both of us, I think, and we hold those memories so dearly. We will go back and visit happily and miss so many of the people there. So, and then Tennessee for sure has been kind of a haven for us in a lot of ways. It's been the next step, but it's also been a unique place of growth for both of us, and then learning about ministry, learning consistent, never failing, step by step, and what we call slow ministry. Mm-hmm. So in New York, I feel like we saw a lot of things happen in a short amount of time. And in here, it's a consistency thing. It's just being here most of the time, and it is showing up time and again, being consistent in your own personal life, and on top of that, having the faith to follow up what you say you believe, and that is a unique thing here, and it's different. We've experienced different kinds of ministry in everywhere we've lived so far.
There is culture within there's worldwide culture and things like that, but even within different states and different cities, there's a culture there that you learn and you grow and you adapt to. So yeah, you have to adapt ministry that way, because ministry is people. So how did you come to know Christ? And can you speak a little bit on that?
Sure. I was very young. I was 4 years old, actually. I grew up, and my dad was a pastor. My mom was a church secretary for a long time. And I remember I was 4 years old. We were having vacation Bible school at our church, and I was not old enough to be in a class yet. I was there because my mom was working as the secretary. And I remember having been in the nursery, and I was kind of hanging out with some of the ladies there, and I went into my mom. We went home at lunch, and I asked her, I was like, what does that mean to be saved? And she explained it to me, and I, as calmly, just very much like my mom, just kind of matter-of-factly. And then later that night, I could not sleep, and I remember looking up, because we were in bunk beds, and my older sister was sleeping above me, and I prayed and asked God to be my Savior. And I remember I've had doubt in my life because I was just so young at that point, but that is always the moment I will always remember as being the moment I chose to accept that call of that Christ wanted me to be His, and I feel very privileged that it did happen so young. Yeah. But
yeah, absolutely. And then how has the gospel impacted your life from that moment on, in your direction and your calling? like, how did you feel that call to want to work with people, you know?
Sure. And I think that how I grew up has a lot to do with it, how I was raised. That is the primary purpose of our calling, is that Christ calls us to be His, but He doesn't call you and then keep you to just kind of sit. Like, there's always going to be an opportunity for you to serve Him, and we should be looking for that. We should be open and excited about it. So I want to say that when I met Kyle, when we got married, that was kind of our thing. We're like, what's God gonna do? Like, He's called us together to do something, and we were just kind of like, wherever that is. And I think the moment we said that, God made good on that, and just said, okay, well, we're gonna go, you know. And working with youth has been very challenging for me. I think it's very natural for Kyle, because in a lot of ways, I want to love people quietly, and I think teenagers need a lot of love in a lot of outward, loud ways. I think when you're in that stage of life, you need someone to come along and just be like, I know you feel insecure and awkward, but you know, I love you even in spite of that. So I think that's challenged me, and I think that's helped me to grow a lot personally. So as much as I've been able to pour into it, God has definitely poured more back into me.
Yeah,
so
that's definitely true. Dan and I working with youth for almost 8 years up in Pennsylvania, like, I love working with teens. They're just, I don't know, I miss them. They're amazing people. And I don't know, Dan and I often said, like, I mean, I'd love to think it's just this deep-seated love for Christ that, like, pushes me to that, but sometimes I'm like, they're so much fun. Like,
they are.
They're so much fun.
I feel
and
like
I just feel like I'm like a big kid, maybe. And maybe so it's more speaking to my immaturity. I don't know.
No,
but
I think they're more genuine than most people are. They, like, you will get 100% of what they think, and I've always appreciated that. When someone is 100% who they are, like, it's amazing to watch it and to see, you know, like, you'll watch them grow up and leave, but it's part of that will always be yours that you got to see, and it was so fun to be with.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you know, you spoke about this has been, like, challenging for you in that way, just your personality and things, but I mean, God, I'm just convinced that when God puts you somewhere, there's a reason for it, for both the receivers, like the teens, and for you. Like, I think it's awesome, and it's fun to see you guys build those relationships with the teens, and I think they notice it and they're appreciative. What would you say for the last big question here? What would you say for you? Like, every person's built differently; they have different needs. What would you say fills your cup when it feels empty, both spiritually and physically?
Sure. Physically, I like to take walks, which is, like, always the bane of Kyle's existence because it's not his thing. I like long, like, I'll walk uphill, downhill, and I've done this my whole life. Mm-hmm. And when I was younger, I always had a camera with me, and I would take pictures the whole way, you know. And now it's just like walking through our neighborhood and being quiet and listening to music. And spiritually, it has always been a quiet time with God and reading the Scripture. And you'll notice the theme. I like quiet. I like peace and quiet. And I think that's something that has always filled me, is like just that alone. I can be alone with my thoughts and think through things, but most importantly, like, praying through those things, because I think that having a conversation with God is always going to be the most peaceful thing, the most peace-giving thing. So.
I'm always fascinated by, like, people like you. I'm drawn to people like you because I get uncomfortable with too much quiet. I need to fill it with noise or talking or you know, whatever. And I find I draw so much strength from people who can appreciate the quiet, and it quiets me. It helps me calm down and understand the importance of it. And I feel like those of you who enjoy that quiet and can hear God speak and that quiet, like, you guys are gaining so much depth and like a relationship with God, and so that's always been a challenge to me. But I just want to thank you for joining me. And you know, there's so much more. Any of these episodes that we're just scratching the surface of our friends and our the other women in our church or men, when men get together or things like that. So really let this be a conversation starter. You know, now maybe she said some things that kind of hit something with you. You know, have a conversation with her. Let these conversations continue. That's really what we want to do here. So anyway, thank you for taking time to sit with us this week, and we'll see you again soon.